Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Gillette Pozos, and today we have a very special guest joining us. Pam Laurens is really incredible, and I cannot wait to share her story with you today. Pam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, so I really want to start by giving the listeners a little bit of backstory on you here. So for everybody, Pam was actually born in 1967 in the Netherlands. She met her American husband there while working at Nike's European headquarters. And so in 1998, she and her husband, Eric, and their 6-week-old son, Sam, they actually moved back to Portland, Oregon at that time. And pretty much other than a period of time where they did work and live in Vancouver, British Columbia, working at Lululemon, they've pretty much been in Portland ever since. Now, the important thing to understand about Pam, she is an incredibly active person, always has been. She was once a competitive swimmer, later on was competing in half marathons as a runner. But, she couldn't help but notice that since moving to the United States, her diet and her exercise just really changed dramatically. And that's where her story really becomes incredibly relatable to all of you out there listening. Because even as an active, sports-loving European working in the athletic industry of all industries, she still found herself with a slow metabolism, struggling with her hormones coming into perimenopause, and just had excess weight that she wanted to lose, but just couldn't seem to lose no matter what she tried. So, first off, welcome to the podcast. I really want to start by just asking you a little bit more about what that was like for you when you moved to the United States and how your lifestyle really was affected from that.
Yeah. Well, when I moved, like you mentioned, my son was only 6 weeks old. And the first year when we moved here, we decided I would not work to get used to all the changes in my life. So, yeah, having a baby, first of all, you have to shed the baby weight after your baby, it's hard. I don't know why it's so difficult, but somehow your hormones are changing then as well. And it wants to hold on to the extra weight, I think, for you in order to feed your baby, to nurse your baby and do all those other things. So, and then in the beginning, it's uncomfortable to run. You're nursing and the running is not very comfortable at that point. So I didn't do very much, even though I was busy the entire day taking care of my baby. I didn't do very much exercise, and the eating also became different when I moved here.
Yeah. So, obviously, I think any of us who live in the United States can completely understand that the food portions here are outrageous, much larger than any other country when you travel and get to experience internationally what the food is like. And I imagine that was even in and of itself a little bit of a culture shock for you of just navigating, eating out, knowing that you're a busy person who works in these industries, that you probably did travel and have to go to restaurants and different things. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, well, I remember clearly my first time that I ordered a salad here. It was over Christmas time, and I think my husband and I had a stopover in Washington, D.C., and we did some sightseeing, and then I was like, I'm going to order a salad. I don't feel like all the fried food. And don't get me wrong, I love fried food, but I was like, let me be good. But then I got a bowl, and I was like, is this for both of us to share? What? It was one giant bowl just for me. And with all the goodies and avocado and nachos and chips and whatever on it. And looking back now, I can see, it's a big bowl of salad, but there's so much stuff in it that the healthiness of the salad it's not really there, because it's just an awful lot, and all the extras that are topping it and the dressing that it's dressed with. It's enormous. Yeah. So at that point, you think you're making a healthy choice, but you don't really.
Yeah, that's the American diet right there. You look at some of the biggest chain restaurants, even for example, the Cheesecake Factory. clearly they sell cheesecake. They also have, these quote unquote healthier options like salads. And I remember once they actually started having to put out the calorie content on their menu as well in some states when that became required, it was a big scandal even when it became clear that some of the salads on their menu were higher calories than some of the cheesecake on their menu. And that seems completely crazy, but that's the world that we live in nowadays. And that's why for so many people it is so difficult to navigate eating out and to navigate knowing how to actually eat healthy without really overeating in that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Now,
and I think, sorry,
go ahead.
What I wanted to address also, like when you're traveling, especially for work, it's always like a social thing. So it's easy to drink alcohol during those dinners. So sometimes a glass more because you don't see these people very much and you have such a good time. But the other part too is that you feel like, well, I'm only here for 2 days and this is their specialty. I should eat it because it's so good, but becomes an excuse almost everywhere you go or for every restaurant you go. It's like, well, they're really specialized in this, so I should really try it.
Yeah.
And that's where you also make the biggest mistakes because you're just saying, well, it's a special occasion, but everything becomes a special occasion when you think about it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. So then as you were spending more and more time in the United States, your kids were growing up here. Eventually, obviously, the kids grew up. They went off to college, became an empty nester. What was that transition like for you? And like, how did that amidst, I know this was COVID time of that time of year. And I know there was a lot of different things happening. Like, how did all of that start to affect your health and your body as well?
That started to accelerate everything. I would say I was, my son went into college about 6 years ago now. So around that time, I was really in the perimenopause where everything was starting. I was feeling changes in my body. And for some reason, they coincide all of that with empty nesting. So your emotions are out of whack and then your kids are leaving. And that's just not a fair situation. However, when they left, my whole routine became differently because it was just my husband and I at home. There was not so much of a routine with meals. Part of the responsibility of I have to be a good mother and provide healthy meals for my children fell away. And I didn't have the same measurements for myself. It's like, well, we can do something easy tonight, or I just have fried eggs or scrambled eggs, or I'll be fine. And I must say, at that time, my eating habits became worse. We didn't sit down at the table anymore. I was very strict about dinners are at the table. And when the kids were gone, those rules were out of the window. We would eat in front of the TV. And yeah, all those habits really changed. And I was gaining more weight and having trouble losing the weight. I tried Whole30, I tried Weight Watchers, and it would go really well for a month. And then it would come back twice as fast. And it was just like a hopeless cycle.
And yeah, I know you had tried Whole30. I know you tried Noom at one point, Weight Watchers.
Yeah.
So you had tried a lot of different things. It sounds like you were really feeling stuck and this weight was just coming on quicker than you wanted it to. And I imagine that in addition to going through your hormones were changing, going through the sadness of becoming an empty nester, your kids moving out, I'm sure it was really hard on you. Like, how was all of that affecting you?
It was difficult. I would say my self-confidence had to suffer a little bit too. I've been working my entire life and in companies that have very high expectations. And just because I didn't look the part, and it sounds very superficial, but because I was getting bigger and I was getting older, I didn't felt as relevant anymore, or as that people were taking me as serious anymore that they used to. And it's all in my head. No one ever said that to me. But those are the stories in my head that I started to believe in. And slowly that really starts affecting you.
Yeah. And your self-awareness is, I think, one of the things that really separates you from a lot of people, is even recognizing that those were stories that you were telling yourself, and that it was the fact that you were feeling that way in your body. The physical fact is just that you were gaining weight, and that's a fact. the thoughts that you are choosing to have about that of this means that people might not take me seriously. It means that people might be not respecting me as much in my work. And you then start to draw those conclusions and create those stories. It's going to cause more feelings of potentially feeling inadequate, feeling just sad, having these things that ultimately we don't want to be feeling. And I know for a lot of women, they can even find that, especially at this stage of their life, they have families who depend on them. Sometimes they feel like it's almost selfish to then take time and money and invest that time and money into themselves, into their health, wanting to lose weight, wanting to look and feel better. Personally, I always like to remind women too that the way that you show up in the world, how you feel about yourself, that does affect all the people around you. And it is not just an investment in yourself. It's absolutely not selfish, but it's helping the other people around you and how you can show up for them. But I guess I'm just curious, Pam, is this something that you have always been that self-aware and you've been able to recognize those things of like, yes, these are stories I'm telling myself, or is that a learned trait?
It's learned. I would say, about 10 years ago, I remarried. I eventually divorced my American husband, and I have another American husband. But we both are very interested in self-development and learning about your psyche. And we've done meditation and just a lot of research on our own, and listening to really good speakers like Eckhart Tolle and all those kind of people. And all of a sudden you realize what's going on in your head, and that things that you think are true are not necessarily true. And that opens a whole new world. And that's been really important for me to realize all these things that are going on, and ultimately also to do something about it. And I think the decision for me to join in the program with you guys was really kicked off by the fact that my brother was diagnosed with brain cancer during COVID, and he passed in 2021. And I was left as the only child of my parents and thinking like, oh my gosh, not that my brother could have prevented getting brain cancer, but I should do whatever I can to stay healthy and not only take care of my mental health, that I've been doing a lot, but my physical health as well. It's just as important.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that when we do consume that type of content that feeds us in a great way, like listening to Eckhart Tolle, reading his books, listening to works from people along those lines, like that really does, I believe, impact the trajectory of your life in so many ways that we don't even realize, because of the way it affects our subconscious. And then pairing that with activities like meditation and like these things that you're doing for yourself, it's no wonder that when you did come to us, you had success so quickly, is because you're that type of person who really can dive into things and learn and absorb and really pick and choose what is for you and what is actually going to be effective for you. And, it's funny. I don't want to necessarily align myself as being similar to you listening to works by Eckhart Tolle by any means, but I guess if we're continuing down this story, at some point, I believe last summer, you came across me on social media and you started to follow along. And eventually at some point you reached out and asked for help. And so we got on a call and we talked about you joining our program. And I guess I'm curious to know, what maybe were some of the things that you were struggling with when you came to me, and what were potentially some of your concerns, if any, about joining VGFN?
Yeah. So I think it was quite an impulse that I reached out, and it's those things that are happening on Instagram. You buy things and you reach out to people. But your story sounded really like, oh my gosh, I think I have hormonal issues. That might be it. And I've always blamed the weight gain on hormones, because that's really when it became obvious. And but I was a little hesitant, to be honest, when I was talking to you. I'm like, what do you know about my body? You're not 56. And but the way you were talking about metabolism and how you guys approach it, I was like, I want to give this a try, because this sounds like something that's very personal and someone who's holding me accountable. It's not just an app that sends me reminders at 8:00 in the morning that I can swipe away. And so I started, And I must say, in the first 12 weeks, I was so surprised about the results. And we only worked on my metabolism and we didn't even look at the hormones. And I already lost 12 pounds and by eating a lot. Like at some point I told Abby, who is my trainer, like, do I really have to eat so much because I'm stuffed?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I really learned, I never really looked at macronutrients and my protein. I knew protein was good for you, but I had no idea how much I was eating. I have never measured that. So once I started measuring it and sticking with it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so full. And I sometimes have a hard time to get to my calorie count.
That's the incredible thing is, you've been with us for going on 6 months. I think it's been about 5.5 months now. And you've been working one-on-one with our expert coach, Abby. And, I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear because, a lot of women in your age group, we have a lot of women in the 50s, 60s, even sometimes older women that will reach out and ask for help. And once they find out how old I am, because I'm currently 27 years old, they immediately make an assumption and they'll often say like, oh, do you only work with women your age? And on top of that, a lot of the women who in our program that do give us like the video testimonials typically are the younger women because they're the ones who are a little bit more typically excited to share their story on social media. I find that women in a little bit of an older age group tend to be a little bit more reserved with sharing their story. So even though we do work with plenty of women in that age group, we don't show it quite as often. And so a lot of women will make that assumption and say, well, you probably only work with women your age. You can't help me. I'm perimenopausal. I'm, for lack of better words, I'm special. I'm struggling with my hormones. It's not possible for you to help me. And they come in with that belief already. And so for a lot of times, those women, they aren't able to see what it is that we can do. And they don't recognize the process that we do and how we individualize that to each woman where they are in their life and their lifestyle. They don't recognize that it can work for them if they believe it will. Because if you don't believe it's going to work for you, it's not going to work for you. Because what you believe, you are going to prove to be true. Your brain's going to look for evidence of that fact. But when you came in, and it's funny to even hear your perspective now of like, yeah, you were a little bit skeptical, which is completely understandable. But I remember when you did sign on, and I think you sent me that message that said that, the day that I actually signed for you, the day to start was the anniversary of your brother's passing. And I think we both agreed that sounded like it maybe it was meant to be. And whether it was that or maybe something else that I said or maybe a belief that you chose to have, you went into this full force of believing that this is going to work for you, listening to everything that we coached you on, really just taking action and just being an incredible client from every step of the way. And that doesn't mean being incredible by being perfect and just perfectly following things. It means trying and showing up and always looking to make those small 1% improvements day after day. And Pom, like that is the reason that you now, 5.5 months later have lost 12 pounds. I mean, from your photos, you look 10 years younger from your first photos to your current photos. And you've had these results from doing two 30-minute strength training workouts per week and eating 2,000 calories per day. So many women would not believe that that's possible for them. What do you think about that?
No, I think I would never have believed it, and I was told also not to do cardio, which I have a hard time with, but I don't. I ride the bike. We have a home bike that I ride, but just for recovery, right? So I'm not breaking a sweat. It's tough because I love that kind of activity, having been a swimmer and a runner, that's kind of like when you get your high. But I must say with my workouts as well, it's really addictive when you start adding weights to what you did before, like I have a push-up goal of, I think 20 after a year because I am really bad at push-ups. So I can do 5 and then I'm like, yes. And we're still working towards that. But like, I already see that that's getting better. And ab exercises that before, the plank. I could do a plank for 10 seconds at the first workout because I remember it was in my first workout as well. Well, this week I went to the gym and it was like, well, do a plank between 30 seconds and 60 seconds. And I did 45 seconds. I outplanked
Wow.
my husband. So it's like, yes. And that's
Love that.
that is so motivating. That is so motivating to see, you know, to see your own progress and also to track it within the app that we have so that you can actually see that you're getting better and you can see what you did last time. And those improvements to me are very motivating. Yeah.
I love that you are finding that enjoyment and that you're challenging yourself and you're getting excited by these changes, because that's how we fall in love with this process of bettering ourselves, and going through something like strength training is challenging ourselves, just trying to be better than we were yesterday. You know, not trying to beat anybody else unless it's your husband. That's always important. Got to beat your husband.
Yes.
But just being better than you were yesterday and letting the time pass and then looking back on yourself and saying, wow, you know, 6 months ago, I could only hold a plank for maybe 10 seconds. And now here I am holding it for 45 seconds and getting excited about that. And then letting that excitement fuel you as you move forward through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also started in the beginning because I don't have a lot of time with my work to go to a gym and everything. But I've done all the at-home workouts and I got to a stage now where the weights are not cutting it anymore at home. And I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to go to the gym. You know, so I'm really trying to find time to go to the gym and find the confidence now to work out there and not being so self-conscious about being there and maybe my weights are not heavy enough or people are looking at me because I'm making strange movements. You know, I gained confidence in how to move and how to use weights and how to do the routines as well.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you for getting out of your comfort zone with that. Well, you know, one thing I did want to ask you about, kind of taking a little bit of a turn here. I know you are such a busy person with your work. You always have been. You've always been very high up in some of these big companies, and now you have your own company, and there's a lot of demands that come with that. And so I know that you also travel quite a bit, travel internationally. With everything that you do, with the demands of your job, with traveling, with all these things, how do you manage to make time for it all? Because I'm asking this as many of the women out there who are probably wondering that same thing, because so many women have the same demands that you have and they struggle to make time for it. They struggle to make time for themselves. What advice do you have for those women?
Yeah. I have a few things that I implemented in the last few years for myself to get everything better. One is get out of bed early. I was one to snooze, and then grab my coffee, go to work. And then the pandemic happened and I had a hard time getting into a routine because I had to work from home and getting out of my bed behind the computer. It just didn't feel right. So I started to get up at 6:30 and have half an hour to 45 minutes on the couch with my coffee and my cat and do nothing. And it was wonderful. It's wonderful to start your day off like that. You can think about what you're going to do that day, but just relax and wake up. I need to wake up. That's just my thing. And that is really working. I've been doing it consistently. I think another important thing is plan your day the night before. You know, especially my work day. At the end of my work day, I look at my calendar for the next day, make sure that I don't have any overlapping meetings. And if I have big things I have to work on, I plan them in my calendar between meetings and block the time out as well, because things just need to happen. Then as far as workouts, I try to do them at the end of the day. That's just my favorite time of day. And even later at night. I'm okay working out at 9 o'clock in the evening. I have no problem with that. And I take a shower, go to bed, I'm good. With regards to traveling, and that's something I really learned from you guys, is to plan ahead and go to a grocery store. I cannot tell you how much that has helped me to make good choices, because I can get my own breakfast. I can get my own lunches. I love yogurt. I make my own sugar-free cereal or granola that I put on it. or I have these wraps that I make. And my favorite recipe comes from you, is the wrap with almond butter,
Mm.
granola, and banana. It's like dessert to
Oh,
me.
it's one of my favorites.
But yeah, I think the advice to really plan, or when you travel and you arrive, go to a grocery store and get all your snacks, especially the protein things that you need. Try to get them and have them in the fridge. That's been super helpful. And drinking a lot of water. I was chronically dehydrated, and not every day is good, but most days, I must say, I'm doing pretty well with drinking water. So I'm proud of that. And that helps, again, also, I think, with the cravings and wanting to eat something.
Yeah. And I mean, you just gave such great advice there. I hope that everybody really just actually took some notes there, absorbed all of that, because it really comes down to those simple things of planning. Obviously, planning on your normal day to day basis when you have a busy job, but especially when you're traveling as well. You have a plan, know where you're going. It's just where you're staying, have a fridge. Most do. If not, what is going to be your plan B? And then from there, where's the closest grocery store? And as soon as you get in, go to the store and get the staples that you need, because you don't have to eat every meal out. Even if it's just controlling one of your meals, like your breakfast or your snacks, that can make a huge difference, not just in how you feel, but in how you feel about yourself and your decisions. And that's going to carry over to how you make other decisions when you do eat out and when you are doing other things as well. I love
Absolutely.
that advice.
Yeah, no, and I think you said something really true. It's like you feel in charge of your decisions. When you already go to the grocery store, that's not a big step. But then when you eat it, you're like, hey, I chose this. I chose to be healthy at this time. So then you have dinner and like, I'm going to choose to be healthy again, because you just get that confidence like, yeah, I can do this and I don't have to suffer. I can still eat. Yesterday I had tiramisu. I loved it. You can still eat those things, but it's also a matter of planning. So then you don't have a glass of wine, but you have your dessert. And yeah, and that's really something you guys taught me, to remain flexible as well. And
Mm,
those things are okay. And if there's one day that you don't reach your goals, it's okay. Then we do it again tomorrow.
exactly. And, one thing I really want to drive home about you that I think is really spectacular, and this has really been a theme of everything you've said, is that you really do stay in control of a lot of these lifestyle factors. But one thing I love is that before you ever even came to us, you started to lay that foundation. I think you said it was 2 years ago, of really starting to wake up earlier, taking that time for yourself, doing these things for yourself. And while to you, it might have just been simply, taking time for myself, waking up earlier. What you're really doing there is implementing different forms of stress management, of doing internal deep work. And those things, while to some people might sound irrelevant to changing our body composition, it really is everything, especially when we're talking about being in that perimenopause where our hormones are more sensitive and our hormones are extremely sensitive to stress. So I really do believe that one of the reasons that you have had great results in a short period of time is that you already laid that foundation of stress management practices, to where when you came in, we didn't have to necessarily rebuild your routines to add in that stress management. You already were doing that. So then, with just simple tweaks with your nutrition and your training and these just habit changes, and when you're traveling, these different things, your body responded really well. Now, for some women, it's not always that simple, because, like I was saying, sometimes we have to kind of break things down, rebuild that foundation before we can build back up and have the body composition changes. Um, I would love to hear your perspective. It's easier for me to say these things as a 27-year-old when I'm not perimenopause. I don't know what that's like. But I know there's a lot of women out there who are stuck where you once were, of, becoming an
Hmm.
empty nester, struggling with a lot of stressful things in their life, traumas even, going through this change in their body, their hormones changing. And now they're dealing with this uncomfortable feeling of gaining weight, can't seem to lose weight no matter what they're doing. And it just feels like what's even the what's even the point of trying at this point?
Hmm.
Nothing's going to work for
Yeah.
me now. What do you want those women to know?
Hmm. The first thought just that comes up to me is love yourself. Love yourself. You know, I think all these things are stories you tell yourself. and that people don't necessarily have told you. Try to find out, has anybody told you what you're thinking, that's true? Or did you tell yourself? And therefore, I think, especially at that time, but I'm already starting with my kids to try to have them do some meditation. Like the basic tool that I give them is like, do you know that there's a voice in your head that's talking about you or that's talking to you? Because sometimes you don't even realize that. There's people who don't realize, like, there is this voice and you can separate yourself from that. And just listen to yourself and feel that separation of, like, that voice and you. Like, where is that? And can you see that? And the moment you can see that, and I think that's all part of meditating, the moment you can see that and you can recognize those things throughout the day, you become so much more aware of what you're doing to yourself. Because most of these things we're doing to ourselves. Hot flashes, you don't do to yourself. Those are just annoying. But there's another thing, there's nothing you can do about them. Like, there's a few things you can do about them, like limited alcohol and coffee, but it hasn't made a big difference for me. But you can fight them, or you can say, well, it's this part of my body right now that it's going through, and let it wash over me. And then after that, I'm cold. I put on a sweater and then I'm getting hot again. But really accepting that that's happening to your body, and it's normal. For a woman, it's normal. But I think when you start fighting those things, you're fighting yourself. You're just fighting against your own body. And I don't think that's a healthy thing to do. But it's hard to accept. I mean, you don't want to have those hot flashes, and you don't want to have pains in your joints or, other things that have to do with menopause.
Yeah. And acceptance. That is truly what it comes down to. And I want to leave it right there, because I don't think I could even add anything more eloquent than what you just said there. Well, before we wrap up here, Pam, is there anything else that you want our listeners to take away from this episode?
Believe that. Let me see, I have to think about this. I think that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always make changes to your lifestyle or your way of eating or your way of thinking. You're never too old to learn. And don't think because you've had this body for over 50 years that you know it, because you don't always know what you need to know about your own body. And some things your doctor doesn't tell you.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. And I think this episode is going to help so many women out there. So I really appreciate you sharing your story and being so open. And I'm really, really excited just for where you're headed and for what is going to be this next year for you, of what this is going to look like. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm super excited for the next year. I can't wait to see where it goes. And I want to let everybody know who's going through menopause or is past menopause, it's not too late.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard it here first, ladies. Awesome. Well, before we end this episode, I do want to remind our listeners that this is episode 99. And on episode 100, we are going to be doing a $250 gift card giveaway to somebody who has left a rating and review and sent us a screenshot of that to my Instagram at Vanessa G Fitness. So if you've not already done so, if you are a repeat listener, go and leave that rating and review, take a screenshot, and then simply DM it to me to be entered in that giveaway. And if you're a new listener, thank you for coming by. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this, so you don't miss any other episodes. And Pam, thank you so much again for taking the time to talk with us today. Thank you, everybody who listened, and we will be back next week.